we've started a series here over the past couple of weeks now, past couple of episodes, and I've kind of titled it "How to Fix the 2018 Bengals." So far, we've talked about being more proactive in free agency in the draft. We've talked about cleaning house with the coaching staff. That so far it kind of happened, but it kind of didn't. And some of it was on their own volition, some of it was not. And we talked about finding an identity for the team, whether it's ground and pound, bombs away, being a balanced team. Obviously this Bengals team has drafted a number of players, exciting players at skill positions, yet, John Ross, obviously major issues last year in his rookie season. Joe Mixon took a backseat for a while to other running backs. They draft they have 3 second-round running backs on the roster, yet they didn't do anything on the offensive line and let their 2 best offensive linemen leave. So you kind of have to say, what are we going to be and what are we going to do? So, and what I'm hoping is that these kind of all weave into each other. When you find an identity, that's when you get a little more aggressive in free agency in the draft and identify the players that you want, not necessarily always best player available regardless of position, but you say, we need this guy who's an offensive lineman, even though Mel Kiper Jr. says he's, not great value right here. This is a guy we like and fits what we want to do. And then obviously the coaching staff was a little bit of an anomaly in itself, but getting new coaches can help you find an identity. Getting Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator changes some things on that side of the football. Special teams coach Darren Simmons is staying, so I think that means that he's one of the better special teams coaches in the NFL. So Marvin Lewis has always valued special teams and is continuing to do so. And Bill Lazor, they're looking for continuity on the offense. They think maybe Andy Dalton can grow in under another year with Bill Lazor, and maybe they beef up that offensive line this year. New offensive line coach, and he has a prototype of guys that they like to draft. Luckily for him, the Cowboys really valued the offensive line in his tenure there and got Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, all kinds of, Tyron Smith was there. So, luckily for Frank Pollock, the Cowboys did that. Let's see if the Bengals do the same. And if they lean on him being from one of the prestigious franchises in the NFL and having one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, if they want to lean on him and that identity. So the other kind of side of the coin that I want to talk about in terms of finding an identity, the Cincinnati Bengals, whether we like it or not, whether they've had a very successful regular season to get them into the postseason or not, they have always kind of been, at least in the Marvin Lewis era, they have always kind of been, excuse me, the little brother to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously they play them 2 times a year. A couple of times under Marvin Lewis's tenure, they've played them 3 times a year for the playoffs. They continue to lose to them. They continue to lose in embarrassing fashion to them. And for the most part, I've said this on this program and many other platforms, they get what I like to call out-physicaled by the Steelers in a lot of different ways. Now, this last game where the Bengals had a good lead at halftime ended up, squandering it. They were as physical as the Steelers, but that is something that we don't normally see when these two teams meet. So my next thing in terms of fixing the Bengals, I almost want to see them get obsessed with creating themselves in a mold of the elite NFL teams and getting obsessed with all things Steelers. And what I mean by that is, obviously, you hear Marvin talk about championships and you talk about him, wanting to go further in the playoffs, but they also mention every year the goal is to win the AFC North. Well, more often than not, especially recently, this division has come down to the Bengals and the Steelers. The Ravens have been in there. Obviously, they won a recent Super Bowl. But the Bengals have had a bit of the Ravens' number lately. Obviously, the Browns have been totally out of the picture. And usually, the Steelers and the Bengals have been jockeying for the AFC North title. So, in order to get another AFC North title and in order to get through the AFC North, you would think that the Bengals want to build a team, and not totally, I guess, but you want to build a team that you know will go out there and you can beat the Steelers on any given day, any given primetime setting, whatever the case may be. You want to have enough talent. You want to match up with them well. You want to have the coaches and the scheme in place, and you want to have that identity that I spoke about. The Steelers are an interesting team. They seem to lose games you never expect them to lose. Twice to the Jaguars this year, and kudos to the Jaguars. They're a fun team. They're really good on defense. Blake Bortles, hey, he's got 2 playoff wins, so kudos to him. But there are flaws with the Jaguars, and most people thought, especially since Jacksonville came to Heinz Field twice this season and beat them twice, most people thought that in both occasions the Steelers should win that game. They did not. The Steelers are always good at rushing the passer. They're pretty stout against the run. They're not that great against the pass. They're okay. But on offense, they can do all kinds of different things. And they have a scheme designed for Le'Veon Bell to be successful. They have a scheme designed for Ben Roethlisberger to be successful. And usually that pays off again at the at the misfortune of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I would think that the Cincinnati Bengals, if they want to fix things in 2018, yes, they need to find an identity. Yes, we got to hope that they've identified the right coaches that have been plugged in certain areas. Yes, we want them to be more proactive in free agency in the draft. I would think, though, that because the Steelers are always atop the AFC North, even if the Ravens are in the picture as well, that the Bengals need to be borderline obsessed with all things Steelers and how to get past that team. Because usually, even if they win the AFC North, which has happened 2 different times where the Steelers were the wild card team, they end up playing Pittsburgh in the playoffs. So, and with the success, the continued success that the Patriots have, the Steelers have, and other teams have, you have to build a team to win your division, and you have to build a team to beat the best teams in the NFL. The Bengals, even in their best seasons, have not been able to beat the better teams, the playoff teams, the perennial winners in the NFL. Yeah, they've had a few nice wins here and there against the Steelers, against the Denver Broncos back in 2014 with Peyton Manning, and other wins that, you can really say, hey, that, quality win here. But I just think that that's a team that you consistently face, you consistently lose to, and is consistently at the top of your own division. And I'm not saying the Bengals need to play the same exact style of football as the Steelers, be Steelers West, I guess. But I think that the Bengals need to be aware and need to construct a roster that they think can play against guys like Antonio Brown, can play against that offensive line that seems to continue to manhandle the Bengals defensive line inexplicably, can continue to be able to exploit some of the weaknesses in the secondary of the Steelers. And it just, to me, and this goes back to a previous point, a lot of people say, and it gets frustrating for national media pundits that cover the Bengals and us fans. A lot of people always say, this is an insanely talented roster. How have they not won a playoff game? How have they not gotten to the Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, that sort of thing, with all of the talent they've amassed in the draft and all of that, and the wins that they've accumulated in the regular season. I get that. But I look back to the let's take the best player available in the draft and not necessarily have a role for them immediately, and or not play a more talented younger player over a veteran. That's another issue altogether. But I think that it almost that the plan appears to be, in the draft, we've got some needs, but we're not going to overreach. We're not going to do that. We're going to take best player available, that sort of thing. There are times where, okay, John Ross, third receiver off the board last year, wide receiver was a need, speed was a need. So, maybe that's more of a need instead of a best player available. But that plan, best player available, is almost a little bit like not really a plan, if you know what I mean. And when I say that, I'm talking about, they've identified some players they like, and usually when you read Bengals.com and others, when they've interviewed Joe Mixon and they've interviewed certain guys, you can almost guarantee that there's a couple of guys they lock in on, and when you hear a name or two, those are players they tend to like. But again, not having a true identity and going best player available many times, you have a roster full of talented players, but you don't seem to really have a plan in place for them. And you don't seem to have something in place to say, this is what we do well, and this is how we're going to beat the Steelers in the NFL. This is how we're going to beat the Patriots. This is the type of team we are, and this is how we're going to match up against certain teams. It's almost like, let's just throw a bunch of talented guys on the field and or sit other talented guys and hope that talent wins over scheme, possible preparation, possible matchups, individual matchups, in between in-games matchups. So I would just like to see the team really have a focus of, in order to get to the Lombardi Trophy, you have to almost always bet, especially with Ben Roethlisberger behind center, with Tom Brady still playing quarterback, Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback, you have to almost always bet that you have to get through one, if not all of those types of teams. And the Bengals need to figure out a formula, a long-term vision, and a bit more of a theoretical plan and a bit more of a mapped-out blueprint to say, this is how we are going to this is how we're going to win the division, and this is how we plan to beat some of these elite teams. Now, obviously, you're not going to win every game of the year. I get it. The AFC North is one of, if not the toughest division in football. And I say tough not only to win it, but just tough in terms of grit and physicality and everything. But I just think that whether you want to absolutely mimic them, absolutely emulate them, or if you want to concoct a plan that says these are the players that will provide matchup nightmares for teams like the Steelers that we see every year, twice a year at least, for the Patriots, for some of these elite teams in the league, and that's how we can become an elite team. Get obsessed with becoming and getting past those types of teams, especially the Steelers, because they're in your own division, in your own backyard, and I think that is going to be something that they need to do in order to fix the team. I'd like to I'm looking at some of the comments here. Trade Andy for Blake Bortles, says John McIntosh. Yeah, everybody, a lot of people are saying, Brandon Seaman and Tom Brooks and Rory P are all talking about offensive line, and I think that plays into both the last couple of ways to fix the Bengals that I mentioned. Finding an identity, and whether those offensive linemen allow you to pass the ball more effectively or whether they allow you to run the ball more effectively. Hopefully both, but find an identity there. And also pass protect. The Bengals, even with Whitworth and Zeitler, weren't that great in 2016 protecting Andy Dalton. In 2017, they were one of the worst in the NFL at doing it. And, I mean, you got to get guys up front that can protect Andy Dalton. And in 2015, that was some of the best offensive line play we have seen from the Bengals in a long time. And obviously, Andy Dalton had the best year of his career, despite missing a handful of games. So I think that may be the first step towards finding an identity, getting past these elite teams, is building these offensive lines to get past them. And heck, you saw when Frank Pollock was in Dallas in 2016 with Dak Prescott and all of those big guys up front and Ezekiel Elliott, you saw what that line can do and how it turned those two guys into megastars. Now, granted, Ezekiel Elliott is very good. Dak Prescott was a lot better than a lot of people thought, but that offensive line really got them to be a dominant team in 2016. So, I'm with you guys about the offensive line and how that can play into all of these facets and the ways I've been extrapolating on how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals. I see a lot of questions. I'm going to get to those in just a minute. We appreciate all of the support you've shown this program. What do you think about how to fix the Cincinnati Bengals in 2018 and potentially they're being obsessed with the Steelers in order to be able to fix themselves? Is that accurate? Is that just way too much of reading into a rival? Or does it make sense? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We can be reached and or the program can be downloaded at iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can join us live on YouTube and Cincy Jungle every episode. And you can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com.